Curiosity stirred before fear, a small, reckless ember inside Clara Whitmore as she lifted her head from the snow and wondered how silence could feel so loud. Wind combed the valley, carrying needles of ice that stung her cheeks and whispered of endings. She lay beside the crooked wagon trail where they had left her, boots stolen, cloak torn, breath thin as spider silk. At 27, she had crossed rivers and dust plains chasing the rumor of honest work. Yet here she was, breathtakingly beautiful in the cruel way winter makes anything pale and fragile, abandoned for being too slow, too weak, too inconvenient. Each exhale painted a ghost that vanished before she could hold it. She tried to stand, failed, and laughed once, softly, because despair sometimes wears a shape of humor. Memory returned in shivers. The men who promised to escort her had watched the storm roll in, had exchanged glances like gamblers counting losses, and had turned away. One muttered an apology that tasted of ash. Another said the mountains had their own mercy. When the last hoofbeat faded, Clara pressed her palms into the drift and begged the earth for heat. Now shame warmed her more than hope, a dull ember burning under frost. She told herself she had survived worse, that hunger and rejection had trained her bones to endure, yet the horizon kept shrinking, a narrowing bowl of white. Somewhere higher on the slope, Elias Crow guided his horse along a spine of rock, returning from the trading post with a pack heavy with pelts and coin. At 34, he carried the quiet authority of a man who had learned to listen to weather. His beard held snow like stars caught in shadow, and his eyes, steady and gray, searched the land for small warnings. Townsfolk called him rich and strange, a loner with too much land and too little patience for noise. He accepted the labels because they left him alone, and solitude had been easier than grief. Still, the mountains taught him to notice broken things, and that afternoon he felt the rawness before he saw it, a snag in the rhythm of the trail. He slowed when the wind shifted, bringing a faint human scent, soap and smoke tangled with blood. Elias dismounted, tethered his horse, and followed the drag of disturbed snow until the world narrowed to a figure curled against the white. Clara did not look real at first, more like a sculpture abandoned by a careless god. When she stirred, he exhaled in relief and knelt, careful as a man approaching fire. Her lips were blue, lashes crusted with ice, pulse fluttering like a trapped bird. He removed his gloves, pressed his palm to her cheek, and spoke her name only after she whispered herself, a thread of sound barely strong enough to exist. "Don't leave me," she said, and the words broke him open. "I won't," he answered, because truth came easier than fear. Elias wrapped his coat around her shoulders and lifted her with slow precision, ignoring the protest of muscle. He placed her against the saddle and steadied her as she swayed. The horse snorted, sensing urgency, and stamped warmth into the ground. Clara clutched the wool, breathing in pine and leather, and allowed herself to believe for the length of a heartbeat that rescue could be real. As they turned toward the ridge, the storm thickened, swallowing landmarks and sound. Snow erased the trail behind them, as if the world wished to keep their secret. They rode in silence. Elias leaned forward to shield her from the wind, and she rested her forehead against his back, feeling the rhythm of survival in each careful step. Images of a cabin flickered in his mind, a low timber house above the creek, fire waiting in the hearth. He had built it with his own hands to keep weather out and memory in. And now, he wondered what would mean to invite another story across its threshold. The question tightened his chest, yet he kept moving, because hesitation in winter was a kind of betrayal. When the slope steepened, he dismounted and led the horse, boots sinking deep. Clara's consciousness drifted like a lantern in fog, but she held on to the cadence of his breath and the promise in his earlier words. Once she slipped and he caught her, fingers firm around her wrist, grounding her to the moment. She looked at him then, really looked, and saw not a legend or a rumor, but a man marked by weather and patience. Gratitude trembled through her, mingled with the old ache of not wanting to owe anyone anything. At the edge of the trees, the storm paused, and a pale moon cut through cloud, silvering the cabin roof in the distance. Elias felt relief rise and pushed harder. Clara tried to speak, to offer her name again, to ask his, but her voice failed. He answered anyway, telling her the cabin was near, that warmth was waiting, that she was safe enough to keep breathing. As they crossed the last stretch, Wind returned with sudden ferocity, tearing at coats and hope alike. The door was close, yet the mountain seemed determined to test them one final time, and neither could know if the threshold would be reached before the cold claimed its due. Forever. Warmth met them like a living thing when Elias pushed the cabin door open, firelight trembling across rough-hewn walls and copper kettles. He guided Clara inside and settled her near the hearth, peeling away frozen layers with steady hands and respectful distance. Steam lifted from her damp hair, carrying the faint scent of pine sap and snowmelt. He poured broth into a tin cup and coaxed her to drink, watching color return to her cheeks in shy, stubborn pulses. Clara closed her eyes and let heat spread through her bones, feeling the border between survival and surrender soften into something gentler. When sleep finally claimed her, Elias kept watch from the chair beside the fire, sharpening a blade he did not need, listening to the timbers settle and the storm gnaw at the roof. He studied her face, not with hunger but with concern, noticing the scar near her temple and the calluses that told of work and endurance. He wondered what words had driven her into mountains and what silences she carried now. Morning arrived quietly, pale light threading through frost on the window panes, and Clara woke with a start, reaching for the blanket as if it might vanish. She found Elias standing by the stove, back turned, giving her privacy while brewing coffee. The small courtesy steadied her more than grand gestures ever had. They spoke in fragments at first, sharing names and simple truths. Clara told him about the escort that failed her, the promises that led nowhere, the fear of becoming invisible. Elias told her the cabin, the trade routes, the grief that had folded him inward after his family died of fever years ago. Their words did not mend everything, yet they built a bridge across loneliness, plank by careful plank. By noon the storm eased, revealing a world scrubbed clean. Elias stepped outside to fetch water, and Clara followed, testing her legs, breathing in cold sunlight. From the ridge, they saw the distant road where wagons moved like ants. She felt the old tug toward town, toward safety defined by rules, and it frightened her. Later that afternoon, 2 riders approached, sent by the settlement to collect a woman rumored to be sheltered by the mountain man. Their voices carried authority wrapped in politeness, offering a bed at the workhouse and a ledger of obligations. Clara listened from the doorway as Elias answered without heat, stating that she was not property, and that shelter given freely was not theft. The riders insisted on order, on precedent, on reputation. Clara felt the familiar shrinking begin, the urge to make herself small so conflict could pass over her. Instead, she stepped forward, heart beating hard, and spoke with a steadiness she barely recognized. She thanked Elias for saving her and told the riders she would choose where to go when her strength returned. The men exchanged glances and left with warnings, leaving behind silence and a tremor of relief. That evening, Clara cooked bread using the last of his flour, kneading slowly, learning the rhythm of the place. Elias repaired a broken chair, watching her hands, not to judge but to understand. When the loaf emerged golden, they shared it without ceremony, tearing pieces and smiling at crumbs. In the days that followed, they worked together, gathering firewood, mending nets, clearing drifts. The cabin changed, not in size but in spirit, holding laughter in its corners and footsteps on the stairs. Clara began to sing softly while sweeping, and Elias found himself humming while chopping wood. One dusk, Clara stood at the threshold, coat folded over her arm, ready to walk to town and secure work, convinced that independence required departure. Elias said nothing, only handed her a small pouch of coins and a wool scarf he had kept from his mother. The gift was not payment, only proof of regard. Clara understood then that staying was not weakness if chosen freely. She turned back inside and set the coat on the peg, meeting his eyes with quiet certainty. He nodded, accepting the decision without claiming ownership, and the fire crackled as if in approval. Winter loosened its grip, and spring crept into the valley, bringing green to the banks and birds to the eaves. Clara planted seeds behind the cabin, coaxing life from dark soil, and Elias built a fence to keep deer away. They spoke of the future in gentle outlines, leaving room for change. One morning Elias took Clara to the ridge where he had first sensed her presence. He did not kneel or declare, only offered his hand, asking if she would walk beside him through seasons yet unseen. She placed her palm in his, and answered yes with a smile that held both courage and rest. If you carry this story with you, remember that rescue is not only a man lifting a woman from snow. Sometimes it is a slow choosing of dignity, the daily kindness that teaches hearts to thaw. When the world leaves you behind, do not mistake silence for judgment. Somewhere beyond the ridge of your fear, a door waits to be opened and warmth waits to be shared, and love waits to grow where winter once ruled.